The Undying Phoenix mod just dropped in Friday Night Funkin', and in this video, I want to give you the full backstory of the mod itself because it is slightly different than other Sonic.EXE mods, considering that this is a different universe, and I also want to give you the backstory of each of the major characters that we get to see presented in the mod. Now, the first major character that we see here is actually named Xanthus, and this character is basically Sonic.EXE. They simply changed his name to fit this new timeline. Now, interestingly enough, in this mod, he's technically mortal enemies with Majin Sonic, or aka Alt Majin, and his apparent grandfather in this mod named Carlos. And just like the original Sonic.EXE, he also unalives Tails, Knuckles, Eggman, and Metal Sonic, and then uses their bodies as puppets or toys just like the original Sonic.EXE. Now, one point that really caught my attention in this mod is that Alt Majin, or just Majin Sonic, is actually an enemy to Sonic.EXE here. And there's an interesting quote that pops up in the wiki. He says, "You brought this place to its knees, you destroyed it and took over, and you ended their peace. That may be true, but you can't end infinity." I found this interesting because in all the other Sonic.EXE mods, Majin has been claimed to not actually be an enemy to boyfriend, kind of like Sunky.MPEG. So it wouldn't be that large of a stretch to think that he may actually be fighting against Sonic.EXE, even though in the mod we don't really get to see that either way. And the last character that we get introduced to is actually Lord X, and what I found interesting here is that Lord X is actually fighting against Daddy Dearest in this mod. And I know some people know that Daddy Dearest is quite powerful, but if you're putting him next to Lord X, it's really no competition. It would be like putting the Incredible Hulk against Black Widow. Can Daddy Dearest probably hold his own for a little bit? Sure, but will he win the fight overall? Absolutely not. Not even a possibility. Now, some people may be wondering where's Knuckles, Eggman, and Tails, and even Metal Sonic, because we all know in the Sonic.EXE mod, these characters are usually unalived and then brought back as zombies. I believe that that's going to be coming in the future because this mod is not fully updated yet. But now that we've gone over some of the major characters and their backstories in this mod specifically, I want to give you their full backstory because Sonic.EXE, Lord X, and Majin Sonic does have a backstory that is deeper than just what we see in this actual mod. So let's go ahead and start off first and foremost with Sonic.EXE. Most of you probably know Sonic.EXE from the creepypasta, which also got turned into a video game. You may actually remember watching Markiplier play it back in the day. I know that was the first time that I was introduced to it. Don't run! There's also been a ton of animations featuring Sonic.EXE that clearly show his demonic personality. Now, many people believe that Sonic.EXE is a demon that is actually possessing Sonic, but that's not technically true. EXE is a completely different entity that is more similar to Fleetway Supersonic as opposed to the actual Sonic. I say this because just like Fleetway Supersonic, EXE is completely obsessed with Sonic, and also obsessed with unaliving characters and animals alike. Something that is unique about Sonic.EXE is that he just wants to kill for pleasure though. It's not like he's killing because he wants to replace Sonic or because anybody has done any wrong to him. It's simply based off his whims. Now, people are always curious as to why Tails, Knuckles, and Dr. Robotnik are all zombified and have pieces of their bodies ripped apart. And to understand that, you have to understand the actual Sonic.EXE creepypasta. Basically, the creepypasta takes place like this. There is a character named Tom who received a copy of this video game from his friend Kyle. His buddy Kyle told him to get rid of the game because he couldn't do it himself and to not play it. But since Tom was such a huge Sonic fan, he of course disregarded his friend's advice and booted up the game anyway. Now, Tom noticed something strange from the very start. The background screen was like this red, cloudy image that was super weird and ominous, and also the three playable characters are Tails, Knuckles, and Dr. Robotnik, which usually that third character would be Sonic, which was another red flag that Tom completely ignored. And it became very clear after playing with each character and going through their storyline that Sonic.EXE was simply chasing these characters down and killing them. What makes it even more creepy though is that each of these storylines were attached to some type of game, as if Sonic.EXE thought that they were playthings. We see this start out with Tails, where Sonic tells them that they're going to play hide and go seek, which basically just turns into Sonic chasing you down, and we assume lunging at you because the screen cuts out then and all you hear is this god-awful scream. We see this continue with each character, going over next to Knuckles, where he puts a rule on Knuckles saying you can't run. And then we see that Sonic plays this weird game of tag with Knuckles where he keeps disappearing whenever Knuckles gets close enough to touch him. And the game ends with you playing as Dr. Robotnik, where you're in this Castlevania-like castle and you are basically running through until Sonic finds you and kills you. Now, I explained the creepypasta and why these characters are dead, but that doesn't explain why they are alive and well in this Friday Night Funkin' universe battling Boyfriend. And the answer to this is actually really simple. It's because Sonic.EXE uses his power to bring these characters back to life and force them to do his bidding. And this relates back to a quote that Tom said in the actual creepypasta that reads like this: "This Sonic was a monster. A pure, evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster. And all his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, Robotnik, and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys. And the game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world and the very hell his victims are trapped in." So ultimately, the reason that Sonic.EXE has so much power here and is able to bring these characters back to life is because Boyfriend and Girlfriend actually stepped into his realm, that being the video game realm. And in this universe, Sonic.EXE is basically a god, like he tells us in the creepypasta. And this explains why he rips all these characters up and basically leaves them mangled zombies. Since he thinks so highly of himself, it also means that he doesn't think very highly of these other characters, meaning that tearing them apart doesn't really affect him and he doesn't really care. The next character we're going to discuss on our list is going to be Lord X. Now, contrary to popular belief, Lord X and Sonic.EXE are not technically the same character. For what we know about Lord X thus far, he is actually an extraterrestrial being originating from the space between universes, or aka the Void. And even though technically Lord X can take on any form that he wants, he has this weird fascination with Sonic the Hedgehog, which is why he looks like a monstrous version of Sonic. My theory is that this has a lot to do with Lord X's personality. He's very methodical, very intelligent, and I think he believes that if he takes on the persona of a hero, people will be more likely to trust him. And this ties in with that twisted personality that he has. He's like if you gave a very smart but demented child endless power. And in turn, he sees humans and other creatures as toys. And I mean this in a literal sense. Lord X likes to play games with his victims that are obviously rigged against them. And if they lose, Lord X will basically devour their soul and their actual bodies. I always say that Lord X is one of the scariest versions of Sonic.EXE because he basically will erase you from existence, literally. Next on our list, we're going to talk about Majin Sonic, and he's basically based off a famous Easter egg that was in the Sonic CD sound test. Even though Majin Sonic was supposed to be some type of joke, he's actually one of the more creepy versions of Sonic because he has this misshapen, smiling, human-like face and no pupils at all, making him look like something out of a straight horror story. Majin Sonic was actually placed in the game as an Easter egg by a man named Masato Nishimura, and he was also the landscape designer and also the voice of the Sonic in the Sonic CD. Majin Sonic's face is actually supposed to be based off Masato's face. And a lot of people believe that since Majin Sonic is in the same mod as Sonic.EXE and all these other demonic versions of Sonic, that he is also a demon. But the name Majin doesn't actually mean demon or evil spirit in this sense. It's actually the nickname for Masato. And since Masato created Majin Sonic, he went ahead and gave him his nickname. And if you activate the Easter egg code in the Sonic CD, you'll actually get this screen that just has a bunch of Majin Sonics plastered over the screen, which we also see in the Undying Phoenix mod as well. Now, one thing that I want to note before I end this video is that some people are asking who is Carlos, and Carlos is actually this guy right here. We see him pop up between songs and he looks a lot like Majin Sonic, which is why a lot of people actually thought it was Majin Sonic. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe today to become a member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you tomorrow with another video. Peace, peace.